It's important to note that there have been daytime sightings of dark triangle and cube-shaped objects in the sky over Hampshire. These have proven to be solar balloons and are not self-illuminated. They don't act like the lights that formed into a triangle. In fact, the solar balloon launches began almost immediately after the UK Ministry of Defence UFO files were released and showed that the Ministry of Defence had officially investigated over 40 cases in that area. It was almost as if someone was trying to introduce a spoiler into the scheme of things to discredit sightings of triangular lights throughout the UK. During the 1990s, one or more big cats, some believe they might have been pumas, were seen in Basingstoke and became known as the Beasts of Basingstoke. It's not unusual for areas which are regularly visited by UFOs to also feature reports of animals that seem out of place. These could be wild animals or animals missing from zoos that appear out of nowhere in an area where they don't belong and have not been previously reported. Some believe they are brought to such towns by the UFO occupants for reasons and agendas unknown. While all this was going on in the UK, the Australian press reported that the tiny town of Marlinksha, with a population of just 112 people, experienced its own alien invasion. On Sunday, June 21, 2008, the outback town located in the Northern Territory experienced the sudden appearance of 3 bright red lights in the sky. In a pattern similar to what happened several months ago in northern Indiana in the USA, a loud noise was heard by residents around 8 o'clock. In fact, the noise became so loud that it actually shook houses and caused tremors. When residents came out of their homes to see what was causing the noise and the vibrations, they saw 3 bright red lights that formed a triangle. The triangle hovered above homes for 3 hours from 8 to 11 p.m. until it finally vanished. During that time, the object moved over several houses and hovered just a few feet above the rooftops. The light inside the houses became extremely bright as the object passed over. Ms. Dixon, our local resident, said, "The light in the house became so bright, it was like we were sitting in a football stadium." Residents said that the loud noise was heard again just before the object vanished. As with the UK sightings, a number of UFOs have been seen in Australia. The sightings began at the end of May 2008 with a report from Lowry Fuchs, 70 years old, and his wife, Gwen, 69. The couple were returning to their home of Elliott following a trip to Queensland. While en route, they claimed that a large UFO sped over their vehicle as they drove along the Barclay Highway. Although they have lived in the Elliott area for 40 years, the Fuchs say they've never experienced anything like this incident. Lowry told reporters, "It was around 4 p.m. when suddenly we saw a dark, silvery flash and heard a loud sound as it passed. It was traveling at a terrific speed, very bloody fast, and there was no warning at all. I'm sure it dive-bombed us, but I can't imagine why. I do a lot of bush work, and over the years I've seen a number of strange, unexplained things, but nothing like this. I actually thought it hit the car, but there were no marks." Australian newspapers report that the couple were traveling in a westerly direction, about 55 kilometers east of the Three Ways Roadhouse when the incident occurred. Just a week before the Fuchs encounter, another man seeing a UFO, another sighting occurred by a man that was seeing a UFO near Tennant Creek. Alan Martin, a deaf Aboriginal man in his 40s, was returning from the store when he saw a disc-shaped object at close range. A drawing he made later showed red, green, and blue lights on a huge disc. Alan says the thing appeared out of nowhere during broad daylight and vanished a few minutes after it was hovering nearby. With all the sightings in the UK, it's not unusual that I would receive a number of emails from that area, but one of them didn't really have anything to do with the recent UK sightings. Instead, it had more to do with a very old photograph. Here's what the person who sent me the emails, Jillian from the Kingdom of Bahrain, says. Hello, one of my favorite hobbies is collecting antique photos, particularly from the Middle East, as I've been living in Bahrain since 1980 and have a keen interest in all archaeological sites. Bahrain itself has a very long history dating back to the ancient times of Delman, the land of the living, where one can find the largest ancient necropolises in the world. These burial mounds are dated back to 2500 BC. I thought you might be interested in taking a look at one photo in particular, as it's so clear. The shot was taken in 1932 in Iraq over the ruins of Babylon. Towards the top part of the photo, nearest to the right side, is an object which on closer inspection looks like a flying disc. The photographer at the time was clearly not aware of the anomaly in the picture. I have many old photographs of old Iraq that I've saved and looked at from the Gertrude Bell Project, Newcastle University in the UK. Gertrude was a British writer, traveler, political analyst, administrator in Arabia, and an archaeologist who mapped and identified Anatolian and Mesopotamian ruins. She was appointed commander of the Order of the British Empire in 1917. I have saved many photographs of Iraq dating back to the early 1900s and am now going through all of them to look for more anomalies. Well, we're certainly glad she found this one. But now let's jump back for a moment to a story, literally a whistleblower account about UFOs from none other than Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Mitchell was one of the 12 Americans to walk on the surface of the moon. We talked a little bit earlier about his Pentagon briefing and the story of him growing up in Roswell. But during the recent radio interview on the UK-based Kerrang broadcast network, he started the whole thing by telling host Nick McGarrison, quote, "I happen to have been privileged enough to be in on the fact that we've been visited on this planet and the UFO phenomenon is real," unquote. That statement shocked the host and began an amazing disclosure from a true American hero. Born in Texas and brought up in Roswell, New Mexico, he has 3 earned degrees, including a doctorate of science degree in aeronautics and astronomics from MIT, as well as at least 4 honorary doctorate degrees from prestigious universities. Among his many awards are the Presidential Medal of Freedom and the United States Navy Distinguished Service Medal. Mitchell began his Navy career in 1952 and completed flight training in 1954. During the 1950s, he flew A-3 aircraft as part of the Heavy Attack Squadron 2 and served as a research project pilot with the Navy's Air Development Squadron 5. In the early 1960s, he was chief of the Project Management Division of the Navy Field Office for a Manned Orbiting Laboratory. In 1965, he entered the U.S. Air Force Aerospace Research Pilot School in preparation for astronaut duties. In 1966, Edgar Mitchell was chosen for the astronaut training program by NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration in the USA. After serving as a member of the astronaut support crew for Apollo 9 and as backup lunar module pilot for Apollo 10, Mitchell, he was assigned as the lunar module pilot. In 1971, U.S. Navy Captain Mitchell was part of the crew of Apollo 14, along with Admiral Alton Shepard and Colonel Stuart Roosa. After the Apollo 13 disaster, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, the world had their eyes on the Apollo 14 moon mission. Mitchell maneuvered the lunar module Antares to a perfect landing on the hilly Fra Mauro region of the moon. Mitchell and Shepard deployed from the module, performed a number of experiments, and collected over 100 pounds of moon rocks. They also set a record of staying 33 hours on the lunar surface. They hold the record for the longest moon walk on record at 9 hours and 17 minutes. Nine days after his mission began, Edgar Mitchell made a triumphant return to Earth and helped reestablish the American public and the government's faith in NASA. He retired from NASA and the U.S. Navy in 1972. Since that time, Mitchell's been active as an author and speaker on many subjects, including space exploration, the nature of consciousness, and powers of the mind. Now 77 years old, the sixth man to walk on the surface of the moon told a stunned radio audience that aliens from other worlds have contacted humans and that governments have purposely covered up what they've learned about these entities. Mitchell describes the beings as, quote, little people who look strange to us, unquote. He says that the traditional description of creatures with a small body frame, large eyes, and oversized head is accurate. Speaking about the cover-up, Mitchell told radio host Nick McGarrison, quote, it's been well covered up by all our governments for the past 60 years or so, but slowly it's leaked out and some of us have been privileged to have been briefed on some of it. I've been in military and intelligence circles who know that beneath the surface of what has been public knowledge, yes, we have been visited. Reading the papers recently, it seems to be happening quite a bit. Responding to a question about disclosure by McGarrison, Mitchell said, quote, this is really starting to open up. I think we're headed for real disclosure and some serious organizations are moving in that direction, unquote. Well, all except for NASA. Despite what Mitchell did for them, a spokesperson for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration responded to his comments by simply saying, NASA does not track UFOs. NASA is not involved in any sort of cover-up about alien life on this planet or elsewhere in the universe. Dr. Mitchell is a great American, but we do not share his opinion on this issue, unquote. It came as no surprise that what other government agencies have described as the most deceptive organization in the United States government, namely NASA, should turn on Mitchell as soon as he tried to tell the truth about UFOs and aliens. At least one other astronaut agrees with Edgar Mitchell. Anyone that has been around paranormal circles for almost any length of time has heard of astronaut Clark C. McClelland. His website states that he's worked with NASA from 1958 until 1992 and served as an astronaut. He's also had a long-standing interest in the UFO phenomenon and is associated with research groups like NICAP and MUFON. Now McClelland says that he supports the claims of former astronaut Edgar Mitchell. McClelland added a press release to his website dated 7/29/08. In his statement, Clark calls Mitchell a friend, supports his claims, and shares his own amazing story. Clark says that he personally observed an 8 or 9 foot tall extraterrestrial standing in the cargo bay of a space shuttle during a top secret mission. He says that he observed this amazing scene on a 27-inch color monitor while on duty at the Kennedy Space Center for over a minute. Clark says that the ET was having a discussion with 2 NASA astronauts. The astronauts and the ET were all in similar spacesuits, according to an artist's conception of the event which he provides. Clark says that the NASA astronauts were tethered and that the spacecraft of the ET was in a stabilized orbit and could be seen just behind the shuttle main engine pods. McClellan describes the ET as humanoid, but he did not have a good enough view to offer much more of a description other than to say it had a slim torso, head that was normal for its body size, 2 arms and 2 legs. Because there was no sound, Clark says that he did not know how the ET communicated with the astronauts. He does point out that he believes there was some sort of communication device on the right side of its helmet, and that the being moved its arms a lot. A colleague later told McClellan that he had also observed the ET inside the space shuttle cabin on another mission. Clark points out that both of these missions were top secret Department of Defense encounters. Is it any wonder that we don't even believe astronauts when they tell us stories about UFOs, when the government consistently and continually covers up information about events surrounding their visits to the Earth? On May 14, 2008, an oval object with a turquoise glow fell out of the sky at around 3 o'clock in the morning and crashed west of the Colorado River near Needles, California. The crash was almost immediately followed by the appearance of unmarked vehicles with government license plates manned by non-uniformed personnel, a small fleet of transport aircrafts, and helicopters, including a sky crane which later removed the object. Like many incidents of its kind, this one quickly became a non-event. So what really happened? It's important to understand that the object in question has been seen in the Needles area before and elsewhere as well. An object described as oval-shaped with a turquoise glow was spotted by a motorist traveling just west of Needles on I-40 on April 17, 2002 at around 3:30 in the morning. During that incident, the object hovered above the road in midair. Another sighting occurred in 1997 near Columbus, Ohio. A photographer was filming clouds when a glowing object which was turquoise in color, appeared on several of the frames that were photographed. The object wasn't seen through the camera lens at the time that the photos were taken. Needles, California is located in the Mojave Valley and is a part of the San Bernardino County. It's just across the bridge from Arizona and near the Nevada border as well. Historic Route 66 and I-40 run through the town with a population of between 5,000 and 6,000 people. Originally named for a group of pointed rocks on the Arizona side of the Colorado River, Needles was founded in 1883 and has been an important stopping place for people traveling east to west into California ever since. It's also the kind of place where the crash of something strange might go unnoticed unless it happened to have occurred at a time when someone was watching. Fortunately, this crash did have witnesses because people just happened to be out watching. The first witness to the May 14, 2008 incident was a person we'll call Bob. He lives on a houseboat in Top Rock, Arizona, a town that's little more than a marina and a couple of stores near Golden Shores. Bob reported seeing a glowing turquoise blue-green object high in the sky and headed in his direction at around 3 in the morning. He was sitting on the upper deck of his houseboat at the time. As it passed, he said it looked as though the object was on fire. He saw the object hit the ground somewhere west of the Colorado River on the California side. It bounced at least once, and he recalled hearing a noise like a thump. Thinking that some kind of plane had crashed, Bob tried using his satellite phone to call 911. His phone would not connect. After the crash, Bob heard the sound of helicopters approaching and reported seeing 5 of them flying in formation less than 20 miles after the object hit the ground. One of them circled his houseboat before rejoining the others. Another was a sky crane that retrieved the oval-shaped object while it was still glowing with some sort of cables or a net and flew away with it. The crash occurred between Top Rock and Needles, west of the Colorado River and south of Needles. Frank Costigan lives 3 miles east of the Colorado River and became the second witness to the May 14, 2008 incident. He got up at around 3 in the morning to let his cat out. While standing in his backyard, Frank noticed a large glowing object streaking across the sky. It flashed a number of colors, including turquoise, blue, and green. The object was headed towards the ground, and he expected to hear some sort of impact noise. Costigan later offered this statement to the press. "I thought I might hear something when it hit the ground. Because it was so close as I thought it was and as big as I thought it was, I thought I would hear something. But I didn't hear anything, and it went out of my view before it hit the ground. It went behind a hill, and I waited to see if I could hear a crash because it was so big that it was bound to bounce to make noise." Costigan reported that the object was bright enough to illuminate the ground. He said that it came out of the northeast, headed southwest at a tremendous speed, slowed down and speeded up again before moving out of his sight. Frank is a retired superintendent of operations and police chief. He worked at Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, from 1978 until 1985, and at Ontario Airport from 1985 to 1986. He occasionally does special reports and news investigations for KTOX, an AM radio station in the Needles area. Frank told David Hayes, the station owner, about the bizarre object he saw earlier that morning. Hayes surprised Costigan with his own strange story. While driving on I-40 on his way to work that morning, Hayes saw a small convoy of darkly painted vehicles exiting the highway. The vehicles had black and white government license plates. The lead truck looked a bit like a large SUV with a dome on top, a truck bed, and appeared to have four-wheel drive. The vehicle may have been carrying a remote-controlled drone. Hayes said that he could see a triangular object that sat on top of several humps in the truck bed, and that it reminded him of the look of a stealth bomber. A dark green van followed behind the first vehicle, and a larger van followed the green one. Hayes told Costigan that he could see men inside the trucks. They didn't have military uniforms on, but after he made eye contact with the driver of the third vehicle, it followed him to the radio station. One of the trucks returned later that day and briefly parked outside the KTOX building, and it seemed to be involved in some sort of surveillance of the radio station. Hayes and Costigan reported the strange events that occurred on May 14, 2008 during regular programming at KTOX for days and asked for any other witnesses to come forward. That's how they obtained the story from Bob, and he wasn't the only person to call in. Someone known to them from nearby Laughlin, Nevada, phoned to report that Janet planes were taking off and landing at the Laughlin airport all night long on the date that the crash occurred. Because the airport and control tower were closed at that time, Laughlin personnel cannot confirm the presence of the Janet planes on the night in question. Janet planes are the nickname some have given to the aircrafts that fly workers in and out of Area 51. A small terminal exists at McCarran Airport in Las Vegas for the mysterious airline operated by EE&G, a U.S. government contractor. Small and larger passenger jets and a few prop planes ferry workers to Groom Lake in Area 51 and the Tonopah Test Range, but there's no reason to expect that such aircraft would land in Laughlin. Because the airport and control tower were closed at the time, the airport personnel simply can't confirm the presence of the Janet planes on that night. Strange things continued to happen in the Needles area after the crash. No one seems to be able to locate Bob from his houseboat, and many believe he's left the area. Tony Sagan, a member of the River Valley Democratic Club in the area, was questioned by a stranger at a club meeting after she appeared on the radio station to talk about the 2008 presidential race. The man wanted to know if she heard any off-air conversations between David Hayes and a witness to the crash he had on the phone in a call-in. Tony said that she had never seen the man before and that he seemed out of place in terms of the way he dressed as compared to other people that live in the area. Although a public record shows that at least one military helicopter was in the area on the night of the crash, there were no police, emergency, military, or government agencies willing to offer any comments about the incident. Noted journalist George Knapp and members of the Channel 8 CBS network TV affiliate in Las Vegas investigative team say that they've contacted police agencies in 3 states, the Laughlin Airport, the Weather Service, the FAA, and several military bases asking for any kind of statement about the incident. All of them claim they know nothing about the crash. Based on the description of the object and the circumstances surrounding its retrieval, it's doubtful that the thing was a meteorite. It could have been space junk, but the fact that it changed speed and seemed to be under some kind of intelligent control makes that unlikely. It's possible that the object could have been some type of experimental U.S. aircraft, but given the descriptions that have been offered, it seems a bit beyond what even the best secret aircraft prognosticators have predicted we currently have available. 2 possibilities remain that might have explained what happened in the Needles area on May 14, 2008. One is that a UFO or spacecraft of unknown origin was tracked by government authorities to the point where it made contact with the Earth. With retrieval teams standing by, the object was quickly removed from the area and any necessary cleanup was accomplished without much notice. The other is that a UFO or spacecraft of unknown origin was being test flown by a human pilot from Area 51 and simply malfunctioned, causing the subsequent actions. When UFO crashes and the government retrieves them, what happens to them? Well, it turns out that someone very famous may have took part in the research or reverse engineering of just such a craft. Did Howard Hughes ever get a chance to view a captured or crashed UFO and its occupants? I've long pondered this question, and there may now be an answer to it. According to a former employee of Hughes Aircraft, he did. The visit allegedly occurred not long after the crash of an alien spacecraft near Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. Now, you may think this story belongs in the Believe It or Not file, and you may be right, but I feel compelled to pass it on to you anyway. After a recent radio guest spot on Coast to Coast, I received an email from a person that claimed to be the daughter of a former Hughes Aircraft employee. Having grown up on Long Island, where many government contractors are located, I'm somewhat familiar with that part of the aircraft industry and have known many people that have worked on various government contracts over the years. That helped me make the decision to write this article and to tell this story. Linda is a retired teacher. She taught in public and private schools for over 30 years and has emailed me an impressive array of diplomas and certifications. She also emailed me a few photos and some paperwork that verifies the fact that her father probably worked for Howard Hughes, the elusive billionaire. Because she asked for anonymity, I can't say much more about her or divulge where she currently lives at this time, although I have encouraged her to come forward at some point and tell her own story in her own words. Linda says that her father was involved with Hughes Aircraft as early as 1942, but the time frame that concerns this story is the year 1947. It was during the summer of that year that Howard Hughes was obsessed with getting his oversized wooden seaplane nicknamed the Spruce Goose ready for a test flight. Officially known as the H-4 Hercules, the aircraft flew only once on November 2, 1947. The amount of time and work that went into getting the Hercules ready for that flight was unbelievable. Her father worked closely with Hughes during the Hercules project and later became a full-time employee of Hughes Aircraft. The two men met after he was referred to Hughes by a mutual acquaintance just after the USA declared war on the Axis powers and entered World War II. Linda told me that Hughes used her dad as a problem solver. He had a knack for being able to look at most any mechanical problem and quickly suggest a practical solution. He also had the kind of temperament that allowed him to work with the eccentric billionaire. Hughes was besieged with a number of problems during the summer of 1947, including a U.S. Senate inquiry into the way he managed funds for the Hercules and XF-11 photo reconnaissance aircraft projects. Linda says that shortly after he testified at the Senate hearings, Howard Hughes returned to oversee work on the Hercules and spoke to her father about his possible involvement in an important government project. She says, "My father and I frequently spoke on the phone during the early 1970s. We were very close and often bounced ideas off of one another. I don't recall the exact date, but I phoned to ask Dad some questions about one thing or another, and the subject of Howard Hughes came up. Hughes' face was constantly on the cover of most of the supermarket tabloids during that time, and we began talking about the National Enquirer and how they kept hounding him, namely Howard Hughes. Linda's father scolded her for wasting her money on the National Enquirer, but she said that her mother also purchased the tabloid. My mother thought it was amusing that the bogus stories about Howard almost always appeared on the same page as their standing reward for proof that UFOs and aliens existed," Linda continued. "Dad told me that Howard Hughes could have claimed that reward if he needed the money, and laughed about the fact that he didn't. When I asked him what he meant by that, he told me the story." According to Linda, Howard Hughes and her father were not friends, and her father would probably not have been considered a part of Hughes' inner circle if such a thing existed. However, he did spend a lot of time with Hughes during the Hercules project, and the two had a casual working relationship as long as her father delivered the goods. She told me that her father said he was busy brainstorming with some engineers when Hughes summoned him into an empty office. Hughes had a kind of inquisitively stern look on his face, and that usually meant that he wanted some advice on how to solve a problem or was about to start a new project. Howard stepped out from the door to the office but didn't close it. There was enough noise outside of the office so that no one could hear their conversation anyway. Howard sat down on a stool near the window. Linda's father stepped over to where he was sitting and listened intently. Hughes hated repeating himself and despised people that were not good listeners. Hughes told her dad that he had been contacted by a high-ranking member of the United States Armed Forces while he was in Washington, D.C. The billionaire was used to receiving unusual requests from the military. He was known as someone that could keep a secret and solve complicated problems. According to Linda's father, this one might have been the mother of all the most secret and complicated situations that the government ever faced. Hughes said that he visited a military base on the way back from his congressional hearings. He didn't mention where it was located and provided very few details about what actually happened there. Linda's father said that Hughes seemed uncomfortable talking about his visit to the base. He hated situations that he couldn't personally control and seemed to indicate that the entire event was orchestrated and controlled by the military. With the exception of Hughes, no civilians were present. Howard said that they showed him a new type of aircraft. Most of it was in pieces, and it was obvious that the thing had either crashed or been shot down. Hughes assumed it might have been something that the Russians cooked up. It wasn't until Hughes got closer to the material that he noticed it was anything but a conventional aircraft. He didn't pick up or touch any of it, but told Linda's father that it looked like, quote, "the damnedest stuff I've ever seen," unquote. The military officers present told him that despite the fact that it was in pieces, the material was extremely resistant to heat, cold, and pressure. They also said it was almost impossible to penetrate, yet it might have been an implosion that actually caused the crash. Howard never said that it had any writing on it, and he provided no further details about the material or the aircraft. Hughes told Linda's father that the dead bodies of the crew members from that aircraft had also been recovered by the military and were mostly intact. He said they allowed him to view the bodies and described them as looking like dwarves or deformed midgets wearing seamless flight suits. He added no details about where or how they were being kept. Instead, he got right to the point. Quote, "They want me to figure this thing out, and I want you on board," unquote, Hughes explained. That was the end of their meeting. A few weeks later, Hughes told Linda's father, took him aside again, and told him to forget all about their previous conversation in the office. He gave her dad the impression that there were just too many hassles and not enough money for him to get involved with that project. Her father felt it was more plausible to believe that Hughes wouldn't be able to run the show and didn't want to get involved with something that he couldn't fully direct. Or perhaps he knew or had learned something more about the project that turned him off to it. It wasn't until many years after their conversation in that office that Linda's father came to realize that Hughes might have been talking about a crashed UFO, and specifically one that probably crashed or was shot down during the summer of 1947. Her dad had never shown any type of interest in UFOs or aliens. Linda believed he might have come across the information about one of the UFO crashes from the tabloids that his wife read. The timing would have been correct because I saved issues of the National Enquirer and other supermarket tabloids during the 1970s and recall articles about alien and military encounters and UFO crashes. I asked Linda if her dad might have been kidding about the Hughes incident. She said, "Oh no, Dad never told tall tales. He had enough true stories about Hughes and other important people he met throughout the years. He didn't need to make up stories. I'm certain he was telling me the truth." I also asked Linda how many times they discussed the story after the first time that he told it to her. She replied, "Not more than a couple of times. He wasn't interested in UFOs. He told me the story on a whim because he thought it might give me a chuckle or two. Dad had nothing to add to the story, and I believe that's why we never discussed it much." Unfortunately, her father passed away a few years ago. I doubt he realized the impact that the story had on his daughter. Before she heard it, Linda barely gave the subject of UFOs a second thought. Afterward, she slowly became fascinated with the subject and told me, "My father told me that what Howard said he saw sounded a lot like what the tabloids were describing as crashed alien spaceships, and the bodies that he viewed fit the descriptions of aliens. I do not believe everything that politicians tell me, but I never saw a reason to disbelieve what they were saying about UFOs. What would they have to gain by lying about it?" It wasn't until my father told me the story about Howard and the material that I began to doubt their stories and their denials. Linda said that she started reading UFO articles published in some of the mainstream newspapers and magazines. Those tidbits awakened a casual interest in learning more about the subject. However, after retired Colonel Jesse Marcel came forward to expose the Roswell UFO cover-up, she went out of her way to learn as much as she could about UFO crashes and military encounters. She says, "I purchased a used copy of a book by Donald Kehoe and read it cover to cover. That book opened my eyes. I now believe there's much more to the subject than we're being told." I asked Linda why she waited so long to tell the story she heard from her father about Howard Hughes and the strange aircraft. She said, "I'm a very private person. I believe in doing all I can to promote education and to encourage students to stay in school. I want them to go as far as they can in life. I do not want to become the poster child for government conspiracies. You seem legitimately interested in discovering the truth about UFOs and aliens. I believe that if people have a chance to learn about the story that my father told to me, they might feel compelled to come forward and share their own experience and information with you." I had a million more questions for Linda, but it was obvious that her father had given her what little information he had about the Howard Hughes experience, and there was nothing more we would get from him at this point. He was only able to tell her what Hughes told him. Not the best scenario, so I cannot say for sure that this story involves a crashed UFO and its occupants. I can say that I believe Linda's dad heard a story about a strange aircraft and unusually tiny crew members from Howard Hughes, and that he told it to his daughter just the way he heard it, straight from the horse's mouth. I'd been researching Linda's story for about a week, and I'd spoken to her on the phone several occasions. With her permission, I recorded the calls and subjected them to a voice stress analysis using an inexpensive testing unit I purchased a few years ago. If accurate, the results indicate she was not being deceptive during our conversation. As an experienced UFO researcher, I was pleased that she cooperated with various requests I had for more information. That is almost always a good sign. Linda has emailed me enough documentation to make me believe that she is who she claims to be, and that her father was employed at Hughes Aircraft. The materials she provided indicate that he probably worked for Howard Hughes on specific projects as a consultant before he became a full-time employee. Because Hughes never actually told him that he saw an alien spacecraft, referred to the dead crew members as aliens, we have to fill in the blanks with some careful speculation. If Linda's story does anything, it proves that people are sitting on important information about UFOs because they still feel the political and social repercussions that can result from coming forward to share it. The blame for that may be placed on the doorstep of a news media that seems incapable of covering anything deeper than where politicians attend church or how old they are. They ignore real news and issues in favor of self-serving statements from government flunkies bent on forwarding an increasingly outdated and bogus agenda. After revealing the story about Linda, I received an interesting email from a gentleman named DJ in Arizona. He says, in 1972, I was working at a government contractor printing company. We made blueprints and Mylar and circuit board mock-ups and large negatives for the Navy, Lockheed, Rocketdyne, Litton, and Hughes aircraft. We were located in Northridge, California. I worked the late shift and went to college in the day. One night I was folding a blueprint that was a wiring diagram that was very, very long. In the middle there was a box with block letters that read anti-gravity chamber or anti-gravity drive. I looked for the logo bug, and it was from Hughes Summa Corporation. I took the print back to the guy running the machine and showed it to him, and he started yelling me. He said, "You never saw that. Put that back and forget you ever saw it. What are you trying to do, get us fired?" This old guy had a sign up on the wall behind us that said eyes only, and there was a rotating flashing light. This was to keep people away who worked there with no clearance. Now, I didn't have any clearance, but someone called corporate, and they were short-handed, and I got to work on a bunch of stuff that I had no clearance to see. After I folded all the blueprints, we counted them and put them in a room-sized vault. So in 1972, I saw proof of our government working on anti-gravity something or another. At least Hughes was working on it, and I know that to be true. I'm 58 years old. I was a computer animator for games and movies, and now I'm a teacher. UFOs didn't just stop crashing in 1947. According to officials at the state-run Vietnam News Agency, an unidentified flying object exploded at about 10 a.m. on May 27, 2008, over the northern part of Phu Quoc Island. Colonel Nguyen Van Quai, and I apologize for these pronunciations, a military commander on the island, was a source of the report, and no civilian, commercial, or military aircraft are said to be missing in that area of southern Vietnam or nearby Cambodia. The object that crashed was first seen in the skies over Cambodia, where officials said it appeared as, quote, a fire in the sky, unquote. The thing exploded shortly after that, and what was left of it crashed on Phu Quoc Island. Citizens of a commune on the island retrieved a piece of metal from the crash that they described as measuring 1 meter by about 60 centimeters. The metal is unusual looking and appears to have symbols engraved or stamped on it. Additional pieces of metal were recovered by members of the military and civilians. There are about 14 pieces in possession of the military command of Phu Quoc District. The metal debris rained down in Gain Dao and Kul Khan communes on Phu Quoc at about 10:20 a.m. on May 27, 2008, according to Lam Quan Chao, a spokesperson for the Provincial People's Committee. While it's entirely possible that the sightings and recovered material may have nothing to do with an alien spacecraft, the events surrounding this crash are similar to other incidents involving UFOs. For example, some of the symbols that appear to be engraved or stamped into the metal, if they are genuine, are similar to those described by witnesses on the thing that crashed near Kecksburg, Pennsylvania in 1965. An I-beam from the Roswell UFO crash in 1947 was also reported to have unknown symbols on it. Phu Quoc Island is a popular tourist destination located in the Gulf of Thailand. It has 13 resort areas and several urban centers. The island was once considered a backwater area known primarily for the production of anchovy sauce and black pepper. Once a French territory with rubber and coconut plantations, Phu Quoc Island housed a prisoner of war camp during the Vietnam War. Vietnam and Cambodia struggled over possession of the island for years after the war until it finally became a part of Vietnam in 1975. UFO crashes are rare events. When they occur in an area of the world that may not be under the control of the usual cover-up suspects, an opportunity presents itself for the nation and people involved to share what has happened with the world. Vietnam is a communist country with close ties to China, so there may be still a tight lid clamped on the entire event at some point. But if that doesn't occur, we may have a chance to see a smoking gun that proves intelligent life forms exist and are visiting the Earth if they come forward with more information. As of this time, sadly, they haven't. Is there a global invasion of UFOs? Well, they're certainly coming to our planet. And despite government denials, by not just our government but many others, this does seem to be happening. And more credible witnesses are coming forward with photos, video, and descriptions to make us think twice before we simply deny these things or dismiss them out of hand. Global invasion, alien incursion? Perhaps. This is Bill Nell speaking.